Tashdile and good morning once again. Today we are gathered here for the first international conference on Tibetan performing arts in commemorating the 60th anniversary of Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts. I would like to welcome our chief guest, His Excellency Samuel Dale Brownback, the United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, and the delegates. Ambassador Brownback is one of the highest US officials to visit Central Tibetan administration. Please give him a huge round of applause. I now request Mr. Nawang Yonten, Director of Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts, to deliver the welcome address.
And good morning to all of you. It's an honor for me and the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts to welcome Honorable Samuel Brownback, U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, to the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts. We are hosting this first international conference on Tibetan Performing Arts in partnership with Tibet Policy Institute and sponsored by the Central Tibetan Administration through USAID. This conference is a very important part of our Institute's 60th anniversary celebration, and we are very grateful and very fortunate that His Holiness the Dalai Lama will bless our Institute tomorrow morning. The proceedings and outcome of this conference shall be very informative for our artists and also other research fellows who are interested in Tibetan performing arts and music. I wanted to acknowledge that it's remarkable to bring all the experts on Tibetan arts and music at one place in Dharamsala for this conference. And for this, I wanted to thank Tibet Institute Policy Deputy Director Tenzin Lekshila and Amyamachi Institute Director, Mr. Tashi Singh. And I wish all the participants of this conference coming from different parts of the world for this conference a very wonderful time in Dharamsala during the conference. I also wanted to acknowledge our special thanks goes to the President of the CTA for his ideas and guidance throughout the preparation of this conference. And in closing, I wanted to thank again Honorable Samuel Brownback for visiting this institute and being a chief guest of this first ever international conference on Tibetan arts and music. Thank you all very much.
I request CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye to deliver the keynote address.
His Excellency Ambassador Brownback and the members of the delegation of United States government, and I would like to acknowledge my cabinet colleagues who are here, and also the secretaries of various departments of CTA, and international delegates who have come all the way to participate in the first ever international conference of Tibetan Performing Arts in partnership with the Tibet Policy Institute. And I'm so happy to see former artists of TIPA who have come back home. And since yesterday, I've been meeting some of them. They're filled with emotions and joy to be back at TIPA, and they will be here for next 4 or 5 days. Some are planning to spend a few weeks here. And all the audience who are here. So on behalf of Kashak and CTA, I would like to extend heartfelt welcome to all of you. First, I would like to extend our apology because the program was supposed to start at 10 a.m., but the audience, His Holiness was in very good mood this morning, even though the public audience started at 8:45, and it lasted till 10, and audience with Ambassador Brownback went on and on for an hour and 15 minutes or so. So I think we were a little delayed. I hope you will forgive us. It's for a good cause. I want to thank Ambassador Brownback for being here, because this journey took a bit of complicated route. I think the karmic connection was not that clear, but Ambassador worked so hard. He pushed from Washington, D.C., and we pushed from Dharamsala and Delhi. Finally, on Wednesday, Ambassador got his visa to come to India, and then he pushed very hard within the State Department and the White House to clear his speech. So in the last 3 days, everything fell in place. So that means, I think, Ambassador, you are bound to be here. That's the karmic connection. So we want to really thank Ambassador for making all the efforts to specifically come to Dharamsala to be with us. When I extended invitation to Ambassador, we all were not so sure whether it will materialize or not. But finally, it did. As some of you might know, Ambassador has been in the forefront advocating for religious freedom for Tibetan people, for Uyghurs, and people of faith all around the world. Under his leadership, he organized 2 ministerial-level conferences on religious freedom, and more than 90 countries participated. In both the times, Ambassador and his office made sure that Tibetan delegation or Tibetan representatives are part of the ministerial delegation. So our Office of Tibet in DC and Representative Ngurla and the staff members were invited both the times, and we had former political prisoners who gave personal testimonies in both the ministerial level conferences. And Ambassador also made a very strong speech on religious freedom in Hong Kong. And he has been very bold talking about religious freedom of Tibetan people and people around the world. So salute to you for your courage and for your moral standing. And I would like to also thank the U.S. government, particularly, U.S. government, the president. As you can see, this conference is organized with the funding of USAID. So both the Congress passed a line item in the budget for activities of Tibetan administration in India and Nepal, and the president signed it, and because of which we are able to do a lot of things, including organize this conference. And Vice President Mike Pence I think he gave the strongest speech ever by any US leaders on human rights in China. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also mentioned Tibet and human rights issues in China. So US government has been in the forefront advocating for human rights of people in China, particularly Tibetan people. So again, I want to thank US government for all the support extended for all these years. And this year, we are celebrating 60th anniversary of the Tibet Institute of Performing Arts. And 60 years ago, when it all started, there were 24 artists or so who first had the audience with His Holiness Dalai Lama. And we had lost our country, and we were refugees. And we had barely a sky and the earth as our friend, and nothing else. And at that particular moment, when the 24 artists met with His Holiness Dalai Lama, His Holiness said, "We have lost our country, we have lost everything, but don't get discouraged. You're only 24. But if you work hard, if you persevere, you will grow and become a well-known, internationally known institute." Can you imagine 1959, when His Holiness was giving that advice to 24 refugees to keep your faith, work hard, we will succeed. And at that time, it was his words that these artists took to their heart and dedicated their life and started this institute. Now, this institute has, I think, more than 500-600 graduates. Not just that, in all our schools, Tibetan schools, we have Tibetan dance teachers now. Our children are taught Tibetan song, Tibetan dance, Tibetan culture. And then, ex-Tipas, as they are known, they have spread their wings around the world and also spread and introduced Tibetan culture around the world. And they are quite popular and well received by international audience as well. So as a former student of Tibetan dance in my high school, my teacher is somewhere here, I think a few of them. So whenever Tibetan music is played, I can't help but shake my legs, So when I came to know that I was the chairperson of the board of directors, so I also took keen initiative in expressing or showing gratitude to my teachers for inculcating in me the importance of Tibetan songs, Tibetan dance, Tibetan customs, and Tibetan culture, and then hence making efforts in partnership with Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts and funding from USAID and Norzang Foundation. In the last 15 months, we demolished the old building and we built the new building. And it was all done, especially the construction took place, it took us 12 months. So even in India, I think it's a record that you build a new building, interior design, everything. But if I tell you the details, you go through a lot of stress and perhaps you will get a few white, gray hair as well. But nonetheless, we have done it. And Ambassador and your delegation is the first VIP guest to the Institute. So we are very grateful, and it's a great honor. And not just that, we wanted to share with the world that Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts is not simply about performance, which is good. We say song is the only language that is shared between heaven and earth. We have so many languages that we speak, but we don't understand each other. But if you want to communicate with the heaven, singing song will get you there. But through this international conference, what we want to indicate is that not only Tibetan songs and Tibetan opera are beautiful to look at and good to listen to, but also this is a serious, substantive issue about Tibetan history, about Tibetan culture, which is several thousand years old, which we have preserved. It has historical significance, much, much deeper meaning than what you can see and hear. Hence, in partnership with Tashringla, we organized this first ever international conference, and we have experts from around the world. I think 18 international experts and 6 Tibetan experts. So they will be making presentation right after the inaugural session and throughout the next 3 days, and we will compile a book of this conference so that whoever wants to know about Tibetan culture, so they can read book and understand how rich it is, how comprehensive it is, how complex it is, so that not just it's beautiful, but also it's a serious issue. So hence I want to thank all the participants who have taken the trouble to fly from around the world to be part of this international conference. Then I can also see some of the former directors of the program here and ex-artists. And in the next 3 days, we will also have an internal meeting where we would like to get feedback from all the artists and ex-artists on how to not just preserve this institute, but grow and sustain it for a long time to come. So please feel welcome and feel free to share your minds and share your thoughts and share your feelings for the next few days, so that not only we have managed to listen to and fulfill His Holiness' vision of preserving the institute and preserving our culture, but rather how we can grow, how we can thrive, how we can spread around the world. That is the next challenge for which you all were invited and for which you all have come. And please spend all your energy. Enjoy yourself. It's a lot of fun. Huh? We have a lot of fun. And yesterday I also saw, the ex-artists to perform item or two. And many of them are in their 60s, but they're swinging their hips and moving their legs and, putting on their best smiles to perform the next 3 days. So there will be a lot of fun, but this is also a serious issue that you all will, think hard and contribute on how best to move forward. So I will not take that much of a time because our chief guest, Ambassador Brownback, has come all the way from Washington, D.C. to speak about Tibetan culture and religious freedom as well. Let me end by making a little political, because after the occupation of Tibet, the first thing the Communist China and the People's Liberation Army wanted to, and they did, was to destroy Tibetan civilization. 98% of Tibetan monasteries and nunneries were destroyed. 99.9% of monks and nuns were disrobed. Now this is based on mainly a report submitted by late Panchen Lama to Mao Zedong, 70,000 characters in Chinese. So after reading the report, Mao Zedong said, this is a poison arrow. He didn't like the report because Panchen Lama was complaining about all the destruction of monasteries and disrobing of monks and nuns that was taking place after the occupation of Tibet, even though Chinese government still claims occupation of Tibet to be a peaceful liberation. That report clearly showed it was not peaceful, it was very destructive. Now this report is very important because he submitted the report in 1963. Because when you meet Chinese and talk to them, they say, yes, monasteries and institutions were destroyed all over China during the Cultural Revolution. But Cultural Revolution started in 1965 onwards to 1973 to 75. But the Panchen Lama's report was submitted in 1963, 2 years before the Cultural Revolution, meaning 98% of monasteries and nunneries were destroyed before Cultural Revolution even started. So that means the design of the Chinese government was to destroy our faith, destroy our civilization, destroy our customs and culture, because Tibetans were made to wear Mao suits. So our dresses were also banned. So clearly, that was the effort. And when we came to exile, under the leadership of His Holiness Dalai Lama, we really didn't have anything, but brick by brick, we rebuilt all the major monasteries in exile, mainly in India. And we rebuilt this institute. We rebuilt our Tibetan Medicine Institute. All these were rebuilt. In 60 years, we have managed to preserve this institute, also Tibetan medicine, and most importantly, revive Tibetan Buddhism, our faith in exile. In 60 years, also Buddhism is back in Tibet in personal and social capacity. The government policy is to still destroy, demolish, and discourage. As we speak, Larungar Monastery was destroyed. Up to 20,000 monks and nuns, it was reduced to 10,000, further divided into academic and spiritual section with 200 Communist Party members full-time to monitor the ins and outs of Larungar Monastery. Yashingar Nunnery, with 5,000 to 6,000 nuns, was destroyed just this year. And if you can Google the photograph, half of Yashingar Nunnery is gone. And they put some, green plastic over it so it looks green. And how many nuns committed suicide? Of 153 self-immolations, there were many monks and nuns, youth, who committed self-immolation. They burned themselves. Tibetan administration will discourage self-immolation consistently and categorically, but it's still happening because they're saying occupation is unacceptable. Repression is unbearable. Our faith is being destroyed, demolished, and discouraged. This is all we have. So the struggle of Tibetans in Tibet continues. So that's why Freedom House comes out with Freedom Report every year, Freedom Index every year. For 4 years in a row, they have listed Syria as the least free region in the whole world. And everybody knows about Syria. But how many of you know that Tibet was listed as the second least free region in the whole world for 4 years in a row? The situation of Tibet is grave. The situation in Tibetans is very serious. So hence, we really appreciate all the international participants who have come here to share your thoughts and share your scholarship and knowledge about how rich Tibetan culture was, is, and should remain so. And in that context, I really appreciate Ambassador Brownback for being here, because as far as Tibetan administration is concerned, we extended invitation to you, and you are, I think, if not the highest, one of the highest US officials to have visited Dharamsala. Your presence sends a message that religious freedom is universal. Human rights is inherent, and democracy is inevitable. And by your presence, you are sending a message to Beijing. I think they will hear it loud and clear, that I am, that ambassador and US government is with the Tibetan people, for which we are very grateful. Because why? You are sending a message of hope and inspiration to Tibetans in Tibet, 6 million. Every day they're longing to hear a good news, a positive news. And person of your standing, a former governor, a former senator, a leader in the Republican Party, to be here, you are sending a very powerful and a right message to Tibetans inside Tibet, that there is hope, that we are with you. We will struggle with you till basic freedom of Tibetan people is restored, faith is granted as universal freedom. Thank you very much.
May I now request our chief guest, His Excellency Samuel Dale Brownback, United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, to address the gathering.
Thank you all very much. Again, my apologies too for being late here, and I guess maybe it just only fits everything I've had to fight to get here, that it would be late and difficult, and I'd also have a throat difficulty as well. It's been hard, but it's gotten done. I'm here, and I'm delighted to be with you. And I'm here to talk about freedom. That's the basic message that I want to deliver to you, and we're going to visit about it for a little bit. Dr. Senge, wonderful statement, great leadership that you and your cabinet are providing here to the Tibetan people. Beautiful institute that's opening up here. I would love to see all the performers taking place. I'm not going to be able to stick around for that, but I would love to see it. I've seen some of the Tibetan culture performances before, and they're inspiring. It's a great honor to join you. It was a great honor to be with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, earlier today. We share a belief in the importance of living together with love, with compassion, justice, forgiveness, respect, and peace. As His Holiness has said in years past, intolerance leads only to hatred and division. He has spoken of the need for worldwide education and unity to overcome such intolerance. This is true for people and governments alike. Vice President Pence at our second ministerial said this: in the United States, our Declaration of Independence proclaims that our precious liberties are not the gift of government, but rather they are the inalienable rights endowed by our Creator. Americans believe that people should live by the dictates of their conscience, not by the dictates of government. One part of that effort is and must be the protection of religious freedom for all people, everywhere, all the time. It's a right governments must protect if their people are to prosper. Governments are not religious institutions, but they are expected to protect the rights of individuals to practice their beliefs, a right without which people cannot thrive. Now, I'm here today to celebrate with you the distinct identity of Tibetans, including the spiritual foundation that derives from Tibetan Buddhism, and the rich artistic life that continues to grow and thrive in Dharamsala and elsewhere. The United States, across successive administrations, has had a profound and abiding interest in the welfare of the Tibetan people and the struggles they continue to face. This is in part because of our deep respect for the Tibetan language, religion, and culture within the cultural heritage of all of humanity. Tibetan culture is a treasure of humanity, and the threats it faces are an affront to the civilized world. We're also motivated by the strong bonds between the peoples of the United States and Tibet, bonds of affinity and mutual admiration, grounded in our shared respect of values of compassion, inclusiveness, and the rule of law. Even this morning, the Dalai Lama was saying again about the story of a gift of his pocket watch that he was given by President Roosevelt, sent when he was a boy. To the tens of thousands of Americans who visit Dharamsala on a regular basis in Bodh Gaya to study Buddhism under Tibetan lamas, the ties between Americans and Tibetans grow ever closer each year. Now, I can think of no better example of this affinity than in the person of the American Nicholas Vreeland, Reta Ken Rinpoche, who serves as the abbot of Tibet's Rato Dransang Monastery in India. Tibet has embraced an American as one of your own, just as we embrace you. We also stand in solidarity with Tibet because we have learned from painful experience that where injustice is allowed to exist unchecked, oppression inevitably spreads and new abuses are perpetrated. We stand with the Tibetan people because their aspirations are just and the price of doing nothing, the price to the future of Tibetans, the price to our own national conscience, and the price to the world's communities of faith is too great to contemplate. I would urge the faith communities of Asia to heed this message. Where the practice of one religion can be restricted and abused, so too can and will others. When the most deeply held tenets of faith are subjected to political scrutiny and control in one place, they are not safe anywhere. I call on the Buddhist communities of Vietnam and Sri Lanka, of Mongolia and Thailand to understand what is happening to their Tibetan brothers and sisters. I call too, thank you. It's getting to you. I call too on the Christians and Muslim communities of Asia to bear witness to the struggle of their Tibetan brothers and sisters and to fulfill the calls inherent in their creeds to confront injustices. Thank you. That helped. Yet history has always shown that repression by governments cannot stifle the spiritual aspirations of people. The Jewish diaspora has shaped the course of human experience despite enduring millennia of exiles and horrific persecutions during the Holocaust. The Catholic Church led the way in resisting communist oppression in Poland. And there is no greater symbol of that greatness of spirit than His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whose determination to lead his people on their chosen spiritual path in the face of great adversity has been an inspiration to the world. As I consider the future of the Tibetan people, I could imagine no better leader to plot the course for future generations of Tibetans than the Dalai Lama. He has shouldered enormous responsibilities over the past 60 years, and I know he will continue to do so with wisdom and grace. His Holiness often comments that he is a child of India. I think it is fitting to acknowledge here India's tremendous support for the Tibetan people over the past 60 years. This support has been the single most important contribution to the survival of Tibetans' culture and religious heritage. As you, the Tibetan community, stated during the commemorations of the 60th year of exile last year, India, quote, saved the soul of the roof of the world. The United States commends India's contribution to safeguarding the freedom of the Tibetan people, from providing His Holiness with safe refuge at a time of great geopolitical uncertainty, to the gifts of land and generous public benefits that the Tibetan people have enjoyed here in Dharamsala and beyond. India's generosity will also be remembered as a gift to the world. The language, literature, and visual and performing arts of Tibet are unique. Now, kingdoms come and go, but cultures should be protected, unfettered, and unsuppressed by governments or parties, so that individuals are free to express themselves, to challenge the status quo, to dissent, to cry out in anger or in love, in expressions of faith. Tragically, those freedoms do not exist in Lhasa or other parts of the Tibetan Plateau, which makes this institute all the more necessary and important. The artistic and cultural legacy of Tibetans has its roots in ancient times and a recorded history dating back more than 2,000 years. Tibetans' links to their own history were violated in 1959 and also during the Cultural Revolution. Battered by the mass violence that Chinese revolutionary nationalists inflicted on the people, culture, and religion of Tibet, just like they did in other parts of China, unfortunately. Attempts to revise, restrict, and erase the unique artistic and cultural heritage of the Tibetans unfortunately continues today. But this heritage will not be destroyed. It lives on today in defiance, a beacon to the world as it has been for centuries. Tragically, abuses against the people of Tibet, as well as against other religious and ethnic minorities, continue in your homeland. The U.S. State Department country reports on human rights and religious freedom have consistently highlighted severe repression of Tibetans' religious, cultural, and linguistic heritage by, among other means, strictly curtailing the civil rights of Chinese ethnic Tibetan population, including the freedoms of speech, religion, association, assembly, and movement. As a representative of the international community, the United States is deeply concerned about the CCP's escalating, widespread, and undue restrictions on religious freedom. We call on the Chinese government to respect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all individuals, everywhere, all the time. Many members of religious groups in China, including ethnic Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Muslims, Tibetan Buddhists, Catholics, Protestants, and Falun Gong, face severe repression and discrimination because of their religious beliefs. And we're deeply concerned over attempts to exert Chinese Communist Party influence in monasteries where banning Tibetan children from participating in religious activities exist. Beijing has long interfered in the succession process for spiritual leaders in Tibet, most egregiously when in 1995 the Chinese government abducted the 11th Panchen Lama when he was 6 years old, along with his parents. We call on the PRC government to release immediately the Tibetan-recognized Panchen Lama Gedhu Chikhi Nima, or share the truth about his fate with the world. We stand with the people of Tibet as they seek to preserve their time-honored traditions, including their right to venerate religious leaders of their choosing. Earlier this month, at the third special general meeting in Dharamsala, Tibetans from far and wide underscored the right of the Dalai Lama and other Tibetan leaders to identify and recognize a successor to His Holiness, and rejected efforts by Chinese authorities to interfere in that process. Let me be clear. The United States shares that view. We believe that Tibetans, like all faith communities, must be able to practice their faith freely and select their leaders without interference. The international community must work together now to make clear we stand unequivocally with the people of Tibet. Tibetan Buddhists and all other faith communities should be able to select, educate, and venerate their religious leaders without government interference. Efforts to subvert this selection affect not just Tibetans, but the global Buddhist community. Decisions regarding the selection of Tibetan Buddhist leaders rest with the Dalai Lama, Tibetan Buddhist leaders, and the people of Tibet, period. That's where it rests. Like any other people, Tibetans have an unalienable right to be stewards of their unique culture, religious, and linguistic heritage. You have a right to do so without interference, and you have a right to do so in peace and dignity. I urge others to join the United States in speaking out when abuses occur and encouraging the PRC government to live up to its international obligations to respect Tibetans' distinct culture, identity, and fundamental human rights. The United States is committed to raising Tibetan issues with Chinese government counterparts at multiple levels. U.S. government officials, including the Vice President, as well as officials from the U.S. Consulate in Chengdu and U.S. Embassy in Beijing, continue efforts to establish conditions that lead to a direct and meaningful dialogue between PRC authorities and His Holiness or his representative without preconditions that leads to a sustainable settlement. The United States continues to urge the PRC government to change its policies in Tibetan areas that have created this tension, to respect and preserve the distinct religious, linguistic, and cultural identity of the Tibetan people, and permit Tibetans to express their grievances freely, publicly, peacefully, and without fear of retribution. We strongly urge the PRC government to protect the internationally recognized right to religious freedom to all individuals and to respect the human rights of members of all religious groups in accordance with China's human rights commitments. Doing so will further peace, stability, security in China and among its neighbors. Through all of our efforts, we are chasing a very simple but important dream, that one day all peoples around the world will be able to worship freely and believe what they want. We want the rest of the world to join us to achieve this goal. And that's why I've come here today, is to further that goal. In closing, I commend to you the powerful image of the snow lion, the symbol of Tibet, found throughout Tibetan visual and performing arts, in paintings and dance. Joyful, fearless, strong, and free. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to the Tibetan Institute for the Performing Arts for hosting me. And God bless our joint efforts to pursue religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, all the time. God bless you all.
We now have a welcome song and a dance performance by the artist of Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts. I now request the Director of Tibet Policy Institute, Mr. Tsewang Gyalpo Arya, to address the vote of thanks.
Tashi Delek, and good morning to all. Honorable Chief Guests of the events, His Excellency Samuel Dale Brownback, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, and his entourage member, Sichong President Dr. Lobsang Sangye of Central Tibetan Administrations, and his cabinet members, honorable ministers, Director of TIPA, and many former directors of TIPAs and secretaries, and our co-convener, Scholar Tashi Sering of Amye Machen, distinguished scholars, speaker, and artists, heads and representatives of governments, NGOs, and schools, and all the participants here. So with this, we come to the end of the inaugural function of the first International Conference on Tibetan Performing Arts, which is one of the major events to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts. I would like to convey a word of thanks to all those who have made this event or function great and successful, and I would like to request you all to be generous in giving them a big hand. First of all, I would like to thank Kungu Sichong, Dr. Lobsang Sangye, for his keynote address and his brief on the importance of Tibetan culture, performing arts, and this conference. And Kungu Sichong, he has played a very important and active role in getting these anniversary functions and this conference in time. We thank Kungu Sichong for his effort and his constant supervision, despite his busy schedule. Please give him a big hand. And we have TIPA Director Ngawanla for his welcome speech, and the teachers, staff, and artists of TIPA who have worked very hard to make this event happen. And thank you very much for all the artists who have done a very wonderful welcome song and dances. Please give them a big hand. And our very special thanks and sincere Tashi Delek goes to today's chief guest, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, His Excellency Samuel Dale Brownback, and his entourage member, who have come all the way to Dharamsala to be with us on this important day. And Honorable Ambassador has, on several occasions, urged China to stop the religious persecution in Tibet and in East Turkestan and in China proper. He has supported the middle way approach and asked the Chinese government to speak with the representative of the Tibetans to resolve the Tibet issue. Honorable Ambassador has condemned China's escalating, systematic, and state-sanctioned suppression of religious freedom, calling it a war on faith. He said China is conducting a war on faith, and it is a war that China will not win. I thank him for his support and his encouraging words today, and on behalf of all the Tibetans in and outside Tibet, would like to thank him and his team for being with us and for their continued support. Please give His Excellency and the staff a standing ovation. Thank you, Ambassador, for your support. We are greatly encouraged. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we have And I would like to thank scholar Tashi Sringla of Amnye Machen Institute and my colleague Lexila, and scholar and staff of Tibet Policy Institute, our consultant and supporter, who have greatly contributed in organizing this conference and in designing the topics and the panel discussions. I thank them all for their hard work and the contributions. Please give them. We have foreign and Tibetan scholars and artists who will speak and share their wisdom and experience during the conference panel discussion. And I sincerely thank them for accepting our invitation and requests. Please give them a big hand. And here I would like also to thank all the heads and representatives of the monasteries, NGOs, schools, general public, and students for attending the inaugural functions. And I see there are many former TIPA artists and graduates from different parts of the world who, despite their busy schedule, has attended to the call of their alma mater, TIPA. And I would like to inform that most of these former artists and graduates of TIPA have been instrumental in promoting and preserving the Tibetan song, dance, and performing arts in their respective host countries. And many of them I have seen doing a great volunteer service in Tibetan Sunday schools, teaching our youngsters about the Tibetan songs and dance. Please give them a big hand. And most importantly, as we are all aware, however good the plan or project may be, and how hard we may work, but without financial support and resources, it's very difficult to achieve anything. For this, we sincerely thank USAID and Tibet Fund for making this first international conference on Tibet a success and possible. Please give them a big hand. So with this, I hope I have covered almost all, but it seems if I have missed any, to them I offer my sincere apology, and at the same time would like to thank them sincerely. Lastly, I pray for the long and healthy life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and may the sunshine of freedom come to Tibet, and may the Tibetans in and outside Tibet get united at the earliest, and may this conference on Tibetan performing arts be successful and open many doors to enrich our culture and our struggle for freedom in our homeland, Tibet. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for being with us, and have a good day.